The world seems to be moving very fast right now. I mean, think about this. Over the last month or so, we were at record highs, and then we had a pandemic spread throughout the world. We had the world economy come to a virtual stop. Our social lives totally disrupted. The fastest bear market in recorded history. And if that wasn't crazy enough, we actually just had a bipartisan stimulus bill passed in Congress. It's hard to keep up with. That's one reason why we've been doing these special edition shows, but we thought we could do something more. Hey, welcome to the Retirement Answer Man Show. My name is Roger Whitney, and I am your host, and this is the show dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement. We truly believe you can rock retirement with intentional action, even in times like these. So we've been trying to do these special editions to help give you perspective and navigate during this really crazy time. Wow. But we thought we could do a little bit more because we are talking about how to navigate this environment in the Rock Retirement Club real time with live meetups and thoughtful chats inside our clubhouse. So what we thought we would do is, rather than try to cram it into these special episodes, is if you enroll in the Rock Retirement Club between now and Tuesday, March 31st, midnight, you're going to have a 60-day free trial. We're just going to let you into the club for 2 months, and maybe that's enough just to help you navigate and be intentional to answer the question, what does this make possible, so you can gain some wisdom in your journey, and maybe you can contribute to our club as well in contributing your wisdom and perspective. So we're just going to give you 60 days for free, and maybe you decide to stay on, and maybe not. But rather than try to cram it into the show, we just said, this is an extraordinary period of time, and this is a great way for us to love on you and you to contribute to the very adult and intelligent conversations we're having in the clubhouse. So go to rockretirementclub.com, and I made a little video explaining it, and you can register right there, and it'll be free for 60 days, and this is our way to love on you, and maybe you can help us, and we can all get through this together. Now, what is the Rock Retirement Club? Well, we just provide world-class education on how you actually do retirement. We have resources to help you take action. And I think one of the most important things is, especially now, is we have a safe place to learn and chat with me, my team of retirement coaches, and the collective wisdom of all the people that are very much like you in the same season of life. So go check it out at rockretirementclub.com. Now, the second thing I want to do is we're going to have a conversation with a very special friend of the show, Fritz Gilbert, author of the Retirement Manifesto, a wonderful retirement blog, and now author of a new book, Keys to a Successful Retirement. Now, if you recall, Fritz was the first retirement plan live subject. Can Carl retire? Wow, that was maybe 4 years ago now. And from that, he started a blog, and now he has a book. And the reason we wanted to bring Fritz on, other than the fact that we love him and we think he's just a smart, wise dude, is that he has actually gone from working and navigated this journey into retirement, roughly 2 or 3 years in now. In his book, Keys to a Successful Retirement, you can find it on Amazon. You can find it at retirementmanifesto.com. Shares a lot of the wisdom he learned firsthand doing or walking the journey that you're on right now. So check out his book at Amazon or retirementmanifesto.com, and check out the conversation we're having with Fritz right now. Oh, and by the way, Fritz is going to come on inside the Rock Retirement Club during the free trial period to do a live meetup with all of our members, where we can share firsthand experiences on his wisdom and others that have walked the same journey. So for now, let's have a conversation with Fritz on the keys to a successful retirement. So Fritz, everyone doesn't know this, but I'm looking at you and you are sitting in your automobile and you're telling me you're quarantined. So self-quarantined. So you're not quarantined in your car, I assume.
No, that would be a very long 7 days. It's been since December 17th, and I'm just being safe. I had this pesky cough, and it's been with me for about a week. I can't shake the thing. And, with everything going on these days, I'm not going to tie up the system and try to get a check. I think all the tests should be reserved for healthcare and first responders and the people that really, are out there sacrificing. So I'm just dealing with it. It's not that big a deal, but I'm just being safe. So yeah, I'm sitting in my truck in front of my friend's restaurant because he's got a very good internet connection, which I don't have at our cabin. So yeah, I'm quarantined in my truck while I talk to Roger.
So this
Very
is
unique situation.
So this is one of the keys to a successful retirement is finding good internet if you live in the country.
Yeah, although I think it would actually probably be more applicable to kind of remain flexible, right?
There
You've got to go with the flow.
Yeah, so. we say agile around here.
I know you do. I like it.
So I'm excited to talk to you about your book because it's pretty special to me because I knew you not win before you were able to write a book, but when you were still working.
Yeah. And even before that, Roger, if you think, obviously I was working, but at that point in time, I had not started my blog. I was basically just a podcast listener, like, so many other fans of yours. And I listened to you for several years. And yeah, so I feel like I've known you for, it's probably 8-9 years at this point. But the first time we actually met, I think, was about 6 or 7 years ago when you did the Can Carl Retire series. And we've been good friends ever since. It's been a great relationship.
And it's been very cool to see you. Well, one, you're just naturally an extremely intentional person. Because you, from a planning standpoint, and you go through a lot of it in your book, which I guess we should mention, Keys to a Successful Retirement, staying happy, active, and productive in your retired years. And I love the cover, and we'll have lots of things going on with that we'll talk about. But you are, and one question I get a lot is, I would love to hear from somebody who is actually doing this.
Yeah.
Who is actually retired, because a lot of the information out there are from, people like me that are helping people do it, but not from the first person perspective of actually making the leap.
Yeah. And I think you're right about that. I think one of the reasons my blog's been so successful, the Retirement Manifesto, I hear a lot of feedback from my readers that they feel like I'm kind of one of them because I've retired. I'm talking about it. I talked about the preparation for retirement. I talked about the transition into retirement, and now, 2 years into retirement changes, right? There's phases. And what I like about this book is it really gave me a chance to kind of look back over the past 5 years and really think through. As you say, I was very intentional. So especially writing my blog, I was doing a lot of research about what makes a successful retirement. I was trying to apply it in my own life. And now 2 years into retirement, looking back over that 5-year time frame, it was really a nice opportunity to kind of condense it all down into a, easily digestible book of kind of what I've learned over these last 5 years. So it's been a really good project to work on.
Now, I remember when you started your blog, because it wasn't like you were a writer. You didn't have a blog in your professional career that I'm aware of anyway. And my impression of you starting your blog was it was really just a public journal of this journey. And it morphed into something more than that because it's awesome and, very widely read, but it was a personal journey that helped you clarify your thinking.
Absolutely. I think, and there's two things I think about when I hear you talk about that. One is, and I talk about this in the book, one of the things I think that's really important for successful retirement is be willing to try things. If you've got a little bit of an interest in something, like I did about blogging, as an example, throw it against the wall, take the first step, see what happens. And lo and behold, looking back 5 years later now, I've found that I truly love to write. I truly love to engage with the readers. I'm helping people. I'm not a certified financial professional. People know that, but they can bounce ideas off of me. They respect my opinion. There's a sense of community, people like you that I've met, other bloggers, just, readers. So it's done so many things to fill some of those voids that you lose when you retire in terms of the social network, the intellectual stimulation, all those things. And it all started just because I had a little bit of an interest and I took that first step. So, I think blogging in my case is a good example of one of those types of things where you do need to be curious and just try things and see where they go. And it can really help to improve your life, your retirement. And there are many, many other things like that I just really encourage people to try.
And unlike journaling, it creates that social aspect, right? Because you've built sort of like I did with the Rock Retirement Club in my podcast, this family of people in a similar season.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you want to add, I think you make a really great point of, as you start to get close to retirement, it's really important to try things, right? And that was what blogging was. And it made me think of, we had a few conversations in the past, and you had flirted with trying a podcast.
Yep.
And up until this point, that hasn't come into season yet, but I think it's equally, and I'm sure you've had some of these where you tried things and say, no, and then you can leave them. You don't have to commit to them.
Exactly. And I would say, if you're not finding things that you're not enjoying, you're not trying enough things, right? You should find things you don't enjoy. And personally, I would probably enjoy doing a podcast. I've thought about it. Obviously, I'd have to drive my truck down to my friend's restaurant every week to do a podcast episode. That's not going to happen. Although we are fixing that. We're going to get some high-speed internet at our cabin.
You're gaining weight because you'd be eating food outside his restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a pizza place. So yeah, but no, I think if you don't try enough things, you're going to find things you don't like, and that's fine. If you aren't finding things that you don't like, you ought to be trying more things, because you're not going to like everything you try. So keep trying, and you'll find a few that you love, and you'll find a lot that you don't love, and you'll find a few that you hate. That's okay. That's how it works.
It makes me think of, you have grown children, and I do too, but remember when they were, from 5 to almost high school, how many things they tried and you thought that was their passion, and then they just dump it. It's sort of that season again, isn't it?
Yep, exactly. But it's different when you're older. I think as a kid, we're just naturally curious, and we kind of get beat into submission over decades of the, obey the boss, follow the rules. You lose that natural inclination to curiosity, but you really do need to try to reinvigorate that. It's one of the things that really makes retirement a lot of fun, because for the first time, you're not doing anything because of the financial implications, right? You're financially independent, or else you wouldn't have retired. So the reality of it is, you can do it for any reason other than financial, which should just open up your whole mind of curiosity, right? So it is a really golden opportunity to try different things.
So we just completed a series on reimagining your environment and where you live.
Yep.
And you talk about this, not directly, but your book is a lot of series of these things, because you and your wife totally changed your environment when you moved, because you lived, more urban, and it's so easy for people to get trapped by what is, how they've organized their life for so long in terms of location and atmosphere. And you really were very intentional about creating an entirely new atmosphere. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah, that's a tough issue. And do you do it before you retire? Do you wait till after you retire? And that's why it was worthy of a full series. In our case, we were fortunate that we have, the Appalachian Mountains are 2 hours away from Atlanta. We were living in Atlanta at the time. So we were able to buy a vacation cabin up here, rent it out when we weren't using it. So it didn't hurt financially. It actually paid for itself. So it wasn't a financial issue, which you got to be careful about. And we were able to use it on weekends. We were able to see if we really enjoyed the place. And it got to the point, Roger, where just every Sunday night we were dreading going back down to the city. We just knew this is where we were meant to be. And we made the move actually before I retired, due to some family situations. My mother-in-law, she had Alzheimer's, and we put her in the nursing home up here because it was a much nicer nursing home. So we actually moved up here 2 years before I retired, and I got a small apartment down in the city and commuted down on, Monday through Thursday, came back Thursday night. And that really helped, because we were so far ahead of my retirement date. One of the things you have to worry about is losing all those friendships, losing all the connections. Well, we were here for 2 years before I retired full time. So we reestablished all those connections before the retirement came. So I think finding a way to connect socially in the new town, spending enough time there to make sure you're not just a tourist, which is what we were able to do by having it as a vacation rental, and avoiding doing something that doesn't make sense financially are probably the keys, but it's not an easy road to navigate.
Well, and I think that's why, in your first chapter about it's like baking a cake. There's a lot of things that go into it. Now, as a sidebar for that, before we talk about baking a cake, what is it about food and planning? Because I know in my book, I think I talk about goals of like building a plate of spaghetti.
You do, yes.
So talk to me about this concept of retirement is like baking a cake.
Yeah, and it really is similar to your bowl of spaghetti. I think it's an interesting metaphor, and I really liked it because as I thought about it, there are so many similarities between the process. And I'm not a baker, but I always write with metaphors. It's just the way I like to write. And if you think about, if you're going to bake a cake, you don't just run out and bake it. You've got to decide what kind of cake are you going to bake. You're going to make a chocolate cake. You're going to make a vanilla cake. If you're going to make a chocolate cake, you don't need much vanilla, and vice versa. Well, as you're thinking about retirement, what kind of retirement do you want to have, right? What do you want your lifestyle to encompass? What do you want your retirement cake to be made of? And it takes planning, and it takes a certain process of steps, and it takes a certain amount of ingredients, so there's a really good analogy or metaphor there to use. And I go through it in some detail in chapter 1. I kind of like starting the book with something a little bit different to get people thinking about it.
Yeah, well, essentially, whether it's baking a cake or planning your transition to successfully retire, it's essentially a project management exercise.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
And so to stay with baking a cake, and you talk about all these ingredients you need, and this is where I think people can trip up, is all of the distractions around what needs to go into the cake, right? Because there's many people that will write amazing articles on cumin and how awesome cumin is, and it solves everything. So, I should have some cumin in my cake. Well, no, you shouldn't, because your cake is different, right? And it's, the nice thing about the cake analogy I think you use, or food in general, there's lots of nice things about that, but is that it focuses to the ingredients that are appropriate for what you're actually trying to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So we don't get cumin in your cake.
I think the other thing that it makes me think about, a lot of people when they're thinking about retirement, especially when you're probably 2 or more years out, you really do think about the financial aspects. Well, that's one ingredient. There are so many more ingredients that go into a truly successful retirement, and you can, but to improve your odds of a successful retirement, it's helpful to think beyond the obvious, to think beyond the financial numbers, and to really get into the softer stuff that are also ingredients in the cake.
That's a really good point, because I don't know if I'm willing to go here, because we think of the financial part of it as the entire recipe. And you could almost argue it's an essential ingredient, but it's not the foundational ingredient.
Yeah, necessary but not sufficient, right? It's you can't build it without the financial side, but if you only focus on the financial side, you're going to have a really rotten tasting cake. Now the good thing about this cake is you can cook it for the rest of your life, right? So you can remix it, you can add different ingredients, you can try to change it out a little bit. So it's not do or die, but that transition, some people do well with this transition and some people don't. And that's really what I focus on in the book, is the difference between those two camps. And I think if you look at the research, the people that really do well, they think beyond the financial side of it. So that's just one of the suggestions I make to listeners, to really challenge yourself with your spouse or your significant other to think about the softer sides of what you want your life to be. That's an important step.
So here in the Rock Retirement Club, when we first started that, and it's related to your idea of building the social part of it, one of the first comments I had was they were driving through town and we were having coffee, and they said, inside the club, I was able to talk to somebody who has been traveling in an RV nonstop for 3-4 years. And this couple were on their first trip. And just by talking to somebody that has done it successfully. Basically, they're a version of them just off in the future 3 years.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the 4-minute mile. Well, they're doing it and they're happy and they're not destitute. So there's hope for us.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that you've built with your blog, Retirement Manifesto, is because you have a very lively comment section.
Yeah.
So how do you find those people? Is it reaching out in blogs or podcasts, or because it's hard to talk about that with your neighbor sometimes?
Yeah, no, and I would say it's typically not your neighbor, right? It's more, and that's, I think you're right. The Rock Retirement Club and let's say the audience of a blog have a lot of overlap. I think the Rock Retirement Club has actually got some advantages because you've got the meetups, you've got the real interaction where people can talk to each other. You can truly talk openly and honestly about what people are dealing with, and hey, I've dealt with that, and you can learn from those that have gone before you. I think in the case of a blog, and the other thing I would say is in the club, people are there because they've intentionally chosen to be there and they want to be in that social club environment. I think with a blog, it's more of a serendipitous approach. When you write for 5 years, like I have, people just over time, it's kind of a compounding growth thing. People find you. I don't know how they find you, but obviously talking on podcasts, they hear your name, different
Well, and you write
avenues.
really good stuff. That's how they find you.
Well, thank you, Roger. I do enjoy writing. I will say that. I really, really enjoy. I love the process of writing. It's a passion of mine.
So here's a question for you on your book. So your book's just released and we're going to have links to it. It's, what is the email that you would like to receive 6 months from now, a year from now, from somebody that's read it?
Ooh, good question. One of the things I've developed, and this is the byline on my blog, but it absolutely applies to the book. It's why I wrote the book. And the let's say the purpose behind my writing is helping people achieve a great retirement. And that's really what it's all about. And I get those emails now. I get emails from readers with some regularity, actually. It's one of the things I enjoy most about writing. And I suspect, and I really hope I get a lot more when this book really rolls out. It's going to be nationwide, Target stores, Barnes and Nobles. I mean, it'll get wide distribution. And the emails that really touch me are ones where people say, they can really relate to what I'm saying. And more importantly, I help them as they approach retirement, and they've instituted things that I suggested. And wow, like the bear market right now, right? I've been big on the bucket strategy. And I've gotten so many emails from people saying, I am so thankful I followed your suggestion on that bucket strategy, and I'm sleeping well at night. I'm fine. Those types of things, when you really know you're making an impact on somebody's life for good, man, money can't buy that. That to me is the real motivation for why I do what I do.
Yeah. It's, and helping people see things from a different perspective, because we're all in our own head, and you have to find the people that, are speaking to you at a particular time, right? The teacher will show up when the student's ready, type of thing.
Yeah.
And in bucket strategies, we build income floors. And I always think of it as, because I've gotten a lot of those emails, I'm having a lot of those conversations with clients we work with.
I'm sure you are. Yeah.
And it's interesting, especially the ones that, when you're doing that, building this bucket system, in our case, income floors, and putting this amount of capital, and this is in your book. Wait, I forget what chapter it's in.
Chapter 3,
I think,
when the paycheck stops. What to do when the paycheck stops?
Yeah, which is a critical question.
Oh no, chapter 2 actually. Yeah.
It's a critical question of, what do I do when a paycheck stops? It sounds, if you haven't thought about it before, where does my money come from? Yep. And some people might just, intuitively, some people, I'll just sell when I need it. Well, that's probably not a good strategy. And you talk about your structure of the bucket system. And mine's a little bit similar, probably a little bit more conservative, which is good or bad. But the key is, I think of that as, the return isn't nowadays the 0% you're earning or the 1% you're earning. Right now is when the return is.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
It's like having an airbag before you get in a crash.
Like that you use, and I don't think I used it in the book, but I've used it in some blog posts. When you get to a certain amount of financial security, you don't need to chase the big returns anymore, right? It's what risk is necessary. Not, you don't want to take more risk than you need. So you don't necessarily have to chase the 8 or 9% weighted average return with a 75, 80% stock weighting. You don't need that. If you've done your math right and you've got things in place, you can make it more conservative and take some of the volatility out by having a more conservative asset allocation. You only need to earn what you need to earn. You don't need to earn more.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because you were able to become a millionaire plus virtually just through saving through your 401k. I mean, you've written about it and you've talked about it, and you've been very good at embracing risk and volatility all through those decades, which is one of the reasons that it's played out this way for you. How has that been 2 or 3 years in, somewhat sitting on the sidelines of a great bull market with so much cash and reserve buckets and being more moderate in your overall allocation? Do you feel like you're getting, not now, obviously, but did you feel like you were getting left out of the party?
I'll go 2 places with this. Number 1, before the crash, and then number 2, after the crash. Not the crash, the bear. It's just a bear, right? These come all the time. Let's get used to it. The bear comes out of the woods every couple of years. We should be ready for him, right?
And they're always ugly.
Yeah, exactly. Big fangs. So I never felt like I was giving up return, because I always knew the purpose of a conservative allocation. And to me, the opportunity cost, exactly what you just said, the payback is now. And I always knew that we'd be facing a down market at some point. And I knew that I didn't have to have the aggressive allocation. I didn't have to get the higher returns. We were fine. And so I never felt envious or like, oh, I'm missing out on the way up. And now on the way down, I actually, I don't try to time the market, but I do kind of more frequent rebalancing in a volatile market. And I actually sold probably 2 or 3% of my net worth in November, December, and January. Part of that was to refill the buckets. I refill the buckets throughout the year, but I also built up a little bit more of a cash hedge. And I've also got more in bonds than I technically need to for bucket 2, right? Or bucket 2, I usually do like, 3 to 7 years. And I was at 7 years plus in bonds. So now as this thing's cratered, I'm actually buying, to your point, what's my risk profile? How's it feel in retirement? I've been buying all the way down, and I'm basically on every 5% move down, I'm just reallocating about 1% of my net worth into equities, and I'm taking it out of cash and bonds. So I'm continuing to be aggressive in a bear market because I was so conservative. I was probably 50% stocks at the beginning of this thing. And I've been just kind of gradually buying in every 5%. I just make a note on my little phone, what was the last price that I bought at? And I know where the next tranche is going to hit. So I just watch the market. When it gets down to that next tranche, I roll another 1 or 2% of my net worth in. And I'm totally comfortable. I'm not the least bit nervous.
Well, I think part of that too is this is sort of come in perfect timing, because my position, and it sounds like you did this, is when you're going through a major life transition like retirement, which is one of the top 5 most stressful things. So when it's a good time to have excess liquidity while you're going through a crazy change, and you found your sea legs in retirement, and you were very, conservative on the liquidity end of it. And now you're rebalancing and it's working out really well for you. So that's good planning again.
Yeah. And I think, is it Wade Pfau or Michael Kitces, one of them that has kind of that reverse
glide path
allocation? Yep. Say again?
Yeah. The reverse glide path.
Reverse glide path. That's basically, I didn't intentionally do that, but I was lower in equities than I would have thought I would have been. And it's worked out beautifully, obviously, with the bear market.
That last little thing made me lose my thought. I had one last question for you.
Retirement, asset allocation.
There is retirement.
Risk tolerance.
So my last question for you, Fritz, and by the way, I want to thank you for doing a live meetup with us in the Rock Retirement Club, where everybody can ask you questions, because they want to talk to you. They don't want to hear me talk to you.
I'm looking forward to it. I like the meetups. I was there when David Stein came in and did his. That was great. I mean, you bring in. I'm humbled to be and honored to be considered a guest in that club, because of the caliber of the people you brought in the past. I'm nowhere near that caliber, so I'm truly honored. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, it's totally, yeah. You're helping us. So you're 3 years in. If you were think of, and we're in a bear market. And people that are even financially capable of retiring already have a very hard time pulling the trigger. And with a bear market, even if it doesn't impact the viability of their plan, it just heightens that sense of maybe I should just work for a couple more years. So what advice would you give them? How do you make the leap to pull that trigger?
Yeah. And I, by the way, thank you for giving me the shout out on a podcast a week or two ago. I think it's last week's about some of the stuff I've been writing that you and Beachwalker talked about in the club. And I couldn't make that one night. And I think you were going to be talking about this as well. And I think we got off on it because of the coronavirus into other stuff. But, you know, a lot of people struggle with making the jump. You throw a bear market into it, and a lot more people are going to struggle with making the jump. It's hard in the best of times. What I recommended in the piece that I wrote was basically, things are more complicated now. I wrote the piece before the bear, but let me just say what I wrote, and then I'll address the bear side of it. What I basically said was, you know, if you know that you're financially okay, you've done the math over and over and over, and you know now that your hesitancy to go is not because of the financial side, then draw a line in the sand, pick a number, you know, pick a date. It can be a year out. It doesn't matter, but say, I am going to retire on that date, and just start working towards it. And if it's a year out, you want to do one more year, even though you don't need to financially, you know, that's not all bad, because that gives you a year to get your head around it and really spend time thinking about why you want, or what you want your life to be in retirement, and get excited about it, you know, and start thinking less about work and more about life outside of work, and get, you know, build the excitement, think about, you know, build a dream. And, you know, some people can't do it. Some people just keep working, you know, that's okay. But don't just keep working because you're afraid of the change. Retirement is great. I had very high expectations, and retirement exceeds every one of them. You know, it's a really amazing, wonderful, enjoyable part of life. And if people can retire, you know, my view, obviously, you know, I've had a great retirement, so I'm biased. You should retire, you know. Now with a bear market, yeah, that throws some curves in it. But again, even if you look at your net worth in the midst of a bear, you know it's going to come back. So if it pushes you up closer to that 4% withdrawal rate, and you really want it to be closer to 3, well, you know there's going to be some rebound. So don't use that as an excuse not to. But, you know, a lot of people are going to keep working, and they don't want to give up the security of the paycheck until they can see that rebound happening. That's going to happen. That kind of goes back to my earlier point. Okay, fine, then draw a line in the sand out there a certain number of months or years ahead, and work towards it, and just do it. It's not worth continuing to work just because of money.
Yeah. As I was listening to you talking, I thought of a couple things that you did very well in that transition. And that is, your mind was focused on the next phase of life for a period of time while you were working. Yeah. You weren't trying to climb the corporate ladder anymore. Your mind was working on the project. And I think of it, you know, from a mountain biking metaphor, is when you're on a mountain bike, you have to look where you're going to be going, because when you come up to a turn, your mind and your focus has to be on the turn, not the direction you're going, because that's going to help guide you. If you don't do that, you're going to miss the turn, right?
Yep. And as a fellow mountain biker, I can totally relate to that. Yeah, you're right. And I think I almost view it like a wedge, you know, your mental, how much time you spend mentally thinking about work should be ramping down as you get closer to retirement. And the reverse of that wedge, the uphill side of the wedge, should be how much time you're thinking about your life after retirement. I probably started a little too early. I was probably, you know, started with my blog maybe 3 years out. Those last 3 years were kind of tough. You know, you're wanting to get to the end. You got to be patient. But now that I'm actually there, it was the best thing I could have done. You know, and when I was at work, I worked. I mean, I gave 110%, and everybody knows that. But, you know, I don't think you can hurt yourself by thinking too much about what your life's going to be like after you retire. It's very important.
And if you really, really need training wheels, because a lot of us think of retirement as an end.
Yeah.
And of everything. And then it's retirement. And even if that's awesome, it's just retirement. You know, and you're doing a version of this. I call it pre-retirement, of having some part-time work where you're earning a small fraction maybe of what you were, but you're enjoying it and it feels empowering. I'm assuming it does for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's two things that I'm doing. One was an opportunistic thing that just came up. I was invited to be on a board of directors, and my wife and I talked about it. You know, I wasn't I didn't make the decision with any financial consideration at all. I knew we didn't need the money. So I said, forget about what they're going to pay. I didn't even know what they were going to pay when I accepted it. I just said, this is kind of a neat way for me, 1 day a quarter, maybe 2 days a quarter, to stay engaged in something that I did for 33 years. I'm a subject matter expert. These guys are kind of the financial owners of the company. They want somebody that knows the industry. And it was rewarding to kind of give back to the industry I spent so many years on, but in a very non-invasive way, right? It's really neat if you get an opportunity to do something like that. And then the second one was the writing, which to me is purely a passion thing. But you know what? I'm not by design, but I'm starting to make a little money on it, right? You're writing a book, the blog's rolling. So yeah, you're right. Finding those things that can bring you that kind of internal satisfaction, but also generate a little bit of money and do a transition. I know you're big on that. There's nothing wrong with that. I think probably most people end up doing something along those lines without thinking they're going to when they're facing retirement.
Yeah. Well, Fritz Gilbert, author of the Retirement Manifesto, an amazing blog, and the new book, Keys to a Successful Retirement. We'll have links to it, and we'll be giving away books inside the RC when he is live with us. I'm excited about your book. I'm excited to get it in my hands. I only got the digital copy. I mean, I got to feel the hand. I get feeling my hands.
It's I've got the only copy right here. I can shake the little pages as Rush Limbaugh would say, you can hear the pages. But the book is supposed to be coming off the presses next week. So I would guess within 2 weeks, you're going to start seeing some copies showing up down there in Texas. And I really appreciate it, Roger. You've been a mentor of mine. You've written your own book, obviously, before me. We're very similar in many, many ways. And I really enjoy our relationship. And I greatly appreciate the opportunity to come on your show. And I look forward to talking to the club in a more intimate setting with all the members there.
Me too, buddy. Be well.
All right. Take care.